The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Tonight, in honor of Earth Day, we meet the filmmakers behind the TVO original documentary All Too Clear, which picked up 2 nominations at this year's Canadian Screen Awards. Up first, what effect will the Trump administration's research funding cuts have on the health of the Great Lakes? That's all ahead on The Agenda. For more than 50 years, Canada and the U.S. have made significant progress in fighting invasive species, reducing pollution, and predicting storms as part of the binational Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. But that cooperation has been under a cloud since the Trump administration cut jobs and budgets at federal agencies responsible for this shared resource. So, what is the future of binational cooperation in the Great Lakes? Let's ask. Gail Kranzberg, Professor Emeritus at the Walter G. Booth School of Engineering, Practice and Technology at McMaster University and Canadian Principal Lead of the Global Center for Climate Change and Transboundary Waters. Mike McKay, he's Director of the Great Lakes Institute for Environmental Research and Professor in the School of the Environment at the University of Windsor. And Jérôme Marty, a Professor at the Institute for Science, Society and Policy at the University of Ottawa and Executive Director of the International Association for Great Lakes Research. And we are very happy to have 3 such smart people who know the Great Lakes so well with us for our program tonight here on TVO. And Gail, to you first. Want to find a little background out about the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, signed in 1972, the United States Congress and the Canadian Parliament. Why was the agreement necessary in the first place?
Back in the 60s, actually, there were very serious problems going on in Lake Erie. Massive fish kills, massive growth of algae, and when they died, they robbed the water of oxygen. Fish were dying, and the governments didn't know why. And they asked the International Joint Commission to please look into it, and they looked into it, and through some of the work done at actually the experimental lakes area in Canada, they figured out it was phosphorus. So the IJC said to the governments, "You've got a problem with phosphorus," and the government said, "Well, we better do something about that, and we will sign a Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement to control phosphorus, to control nutrient enrichment, and to bring the lakes back to health."
And, Jérôme, what would you point to suggest to everybody watching and listening that it's a good thing we signed that agreement, because look what we've got in the meantime?
It's a very good thing because there were many progresses made to restore areas that were highly polluted. We still have problems in the Great Lakes. The health of the Great Lakes varies from very good in Lake Superior to quite bad in Lake Erie. There's still a super fund dedicated to Lake Erie. Progresses in the Great Lakes take a long time because these systems are large. They take special resources that do not apply for smaller lakes when they need to be restored.
Mike, has it been an unambiguous success having this agreement in place?
I think so. I think this is. I think the Great Lakes are really, held up around the world as being a success story. This binational cooperation we've had between Canada and the U.S. Over the past 50 plus years to ensure that the lakes remain swimmable, drinkable, fishable.
Gail, has anybody on either side of the border over the intervening years, since this was formed more than 50 years ago, this agreement, have they said, it's not really working. We don't really need this agreement. Let's not bother.
Not to my knowledge. In fact, there's a provision in the agreement to review its effectiveness every period of time, set period of time. And the governments have done that in consultation with others and said, there's more that we should be doing. We should be looking at persistent toxic substances. Most recently, we should be looking at climate change and how we make communities more resilient to climate change. So there's always an interest to increase the knowledge. We have new science, we need new programs, and the cooperation has been exceptional, and there people who run under the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement have a passion for the excellence of the Great Lakes, and so there's never been a question, maybe we don't need it.
Jérôme, do you agree with that on both sides of the border, people have concluded this is something we need?
The Great Lakes protection polls at over 90% of the populations as a priority. I think it speaks to the work that has been done in a binational way. The agreement is flexible. There are these times where revisions are allowed. We've added things to the agreement. To the agreements, we're looking into microplastics. That's one of the upcoming stressors that scientists are investigating at the moment. So I do think it has worked very well. In fact, it is seen as a model worldwide on how binational questions can be advanced together.
In which case, Mike, I'd like to know how last month, when hundreds of people were laid off at the U.S. National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration and the Fish and Wildlife Service, fired by the Trump administration, I'd like to know how you reacted when you heard that news.
It was distressing. Many of those people were our colleagues, our friends, living in a place like Windsor, where we see Detroit right across the river. We engage with our U.S. colleagues daily, if not weekly, if not daily, and to see, many of them losing jobs. So it's of concern moving forward.
I understand you are sad when a colleague loses a job, but were those people all doing work that needed doing?
This is what the U.S. is going through a phase now where they are examining efficiency in their organizations, and I'm not to judge whether they are doing what needs to be done, but we look at a lot of programs that are potentially at risk moving forward because some of those very people have now lost their jobs.
Gail, that's what I want to find out. I mean, obviously, you say they're going through a phase. Feels like a little more than a phase right now. But anyway, America is going through something right now where they're laying off thousands upon thousands of public servants. Most of the time, they say these people are not needed and we can get on without them. The people who are losing their jobs at these two organizations, do they have a function that now something will be lost if they're not working anymore?
So I'd like to point to NOAA. And
NOAA is the acronym for the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration.
I left that to you to say.
and I didn't say it well, so thank you.
They do an enormous amount of monitoring, surveillance, modeling, and so on. And there's an efficiency there. Instead of Canada doing everything that NOAA's doing, Canada does their thing, NOAA does their thing, and they share data and information, which all of a sudden is not available. This kind of information is necessary for weather forecasting. It's necessary for safe transportation, marine transportation, let alone predicting harmful algal blooms that could cause poisons in our drinking water. All of that is absolutely necessary to understand the lakes and therefore to manage the lakes. And without those people being fired and that function going away, we're going to have a gap in information, and we will not be able to manage the lakes as efficiently and as well and to protect the people and the economy of the region as had they been kept on board to do the work they do.
Jérôme, follow up on that if you would. What is being lost with the loss of these jobs?
We're losing the ability to ring an alarm when it's needed. If we look at the management of the Great Lakes and look at those who need the information the most, I think municipalities are pretty high up on the list. They don't have the capability, the infrastructure to do all the things they need to know to keep the people safe. If we have a bloom of algae in Lake Erie, and we will have a bloom of algae next summer, it is guaranteed. And if we are not able to detect when that bloom becomes toxic, there is a risk for people who are taking that water for drinking water purposes. 2014, the city of Toledo, 500,000 people lost access to drinking water for 2 weeks. It has happened. We know, scientists often project, say this may happen or may not. This has happened. And if we don't have the ability to report the science that tells this water is now dangerous, then I think we're going to see some significant problems.
And Mike, for those people in the administration who say, you guys are just fighting to hang on to your turf and your jobs, we can get along without these people, what's the response?
Well, as Gail and Jerome have mentioned, these programs are programs we rely on. As was mentioned, the harmful algal blooms. Again, in Windsor, we have Lake St. Clair, Western Lake Erie in proximity. Those are poster children for harmful algal blooms in the Great Lakes.
You want to see the poster? We got a picture of this here. We got an aerial shot here. I'm going to have to describe this for those listening on podcast, but for those watching on television, you can see this. This is an aerial photo of algal bloom in Lake Erie, taken by the Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. This is the summer of 2019. Now, if you look at the bottom middle of that picture, you can see a vertical line, and that's a freighter. Now, freighters are pretty big, and look at the size of that algal bloom around that. I mean, it's massive. It's absolutely massive. It just completely engulfs the entire freighter here. So just pick up on the story there, Mike. Why is that of concern?
Well, these blooms produce toxins. These toxins are effectively removed by our municipal water utilities, but that comes at expense. So we become reliant on the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration for their monitoring, for their remote sensing, their forecasting, to tell us where those blooms are going to move in the lakes, to provide that early alert to municipalities about a bloom encroaching upon their water intake, and whether they have to ramp up treatment operations, which again is costly. So it's really, in the end, it's saving money by having these early alerts. And that is going to be at risk.
There was an old muffler commercial on TV. It says you can pay me now or you can pay me later. Better to pay it now.
Exactly. A lot less expensive too.
Less expensive to pay now than later when you're trying to clean everything up. There's another term here I've seen, cyanobacteria blooms. What are they?
That's the harmful algal blooms. The harmful algae is actually a misnomer. Cyanobacteria are a bacteria like Microcystis. It's a bacteria that photosynthesizes. So, plants photosynthesize, the green stuff. So it's a bacteria that photosynthesizes. It looks like an algae. It's actually a bacteria that puts out the kinds of poisons that these two gentlemen have been talking about. So those are poisons that, in fact, let alone drinking water, if you were down on the beach when you had that picture up of that algal bloom and your dog went in and took a drink, you could kill them.
Yep.
Just drinking that water could kill the dog.
If it was cyanobacteria, yeah.
Okay, let's continue on here. What are some of the projects managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service important to the health of the Great Lakes that are now in jeopardy because of the Trump cuts?
If we go back to the history of the Great Lakes, until 2006, it was the body of freshwater on Earth with the highest rate of invasion. Invasive species, about 180 species recorded about until 2006. And we have managed these species, one in particular, the sea lamprey, which is a very fierce carnivorous fish who has disseminated the fisheries in several of the Great Lakes. And we've been able to manage that species by applying a chemical that kills the larvae, the larvae of sea lamprey. One female sea lamprey is able to produce about 100,000 larvae. So in the spring is a critical time. We have biologists going out to apply this lamprey seed. And as we heard a little bit earlier, a couple of months ago, people whose responsibility is to apply that chemicals got laid off. And that created a wave of concerns for those managing invasive species throughout the Great Lakes. This is the Great Lakes Fisheries Commissions on the US side and the Department of Fisheries and Ocean on the Canadian side that are involved with that control. And the worry is that if we miss the spring, because we need to apply this at a very critical, specific moment in time, then the sea lamprey could bounce back very quickly. Things are very fluid. These people were rehired, but it does show that things are changing very fast. We don't know if these people are going to be fired again.
But I think that's also an example where there's been pushback, an effective pushback. That was a case where those employees were terminated. A Republican congressman from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan pushed back and said, this is going to affect our recreational fishery. We can't have this. And a grassroots campaign gained momentum. And in that case, they identified, well, that was a mistake. We have to bring those folks back. Will this happen across the board? I don't know.
That was going to be my next question. But what are you hearing from your American colleagues as to whether or not they can push back and get more jobs restored or perhaps stave off future cuts to come?
Well, there's precedent for what we're seeing now. In previous, we call this the skinny budget, that first budget that comes out before it actually goes to Congress for appropriations. The Great Lakes Restoration Initiative has been zeroed out in previous budgets. The Sea Grant college program has been zeroed out in previous budgets. The Great Lakes, I'm always impressed. I worked in the U.S. for 30 years. I worked in Ohio, very conservative district. But when it came to the Great Lakes, the representatives were very supportive. You either recognize the Great Lakes as being important for ecosystem services, for clean drinking water, for fishing. You might recognize the Great Lakes as important for driving our economy. Regardless, both sides of the aisle find the Great Lakes important. So I'm expecting there will be pushback. I'm expecting that what we're seeing, the stories that were leaked last week about these massive cuts, which are, again, crazy. I expect there will be pushback and that there will be some reconciliation. We've seen it in the past. This is too important of a resource to lose.
Gail, can I get you on the politics of all this? Because I just want to follow up on this point that Mike has made. There are precious few issues in North America today where you think there's sort of 90-10 support, right? There's a lot of 50-50 issues these days. Wouldn't the health and future of the Great Lakes, wouldn't you think that would be an issue that people on both sides of the political aisle can get around?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And just to build on what Mike said, when the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative was going to be killed, you actually covered this. The governors, didn't matter whether they were Republican or Democrat, they said, no way, those are jobs, that's our economy, that's our wealth. This is supposed to be about safety, efficiency. That's what the political agenda is. So the politics of this is, the Great Lakes are like a $6 trillion economy, like possibly the third largest economy in the world if it was its own nation, because of the water. And so political parties don't matter. It's the economy of the region that depends on the waters of the Great Lakes that's important, and the governors and the premiers will fight for that. And I can't imagine that we'd have partisan politics even in Canada around that. This is the economy, like 50% of the GDP in Canada is built on the waters of the Great Lakes. So it is clearly a national significance, an international significance, a transnational significance. And those people who live here understand the value of maintaining its integrity and will fight hard. I believe. I mean, I don't have evidence, but clearly logic says they will fight hard to protect the waters for the wealth and health of the people.
We started this conversation talking about Lake Erie and the phosphorus problems that were in the lake more than 50 years ago. And I'm going to ask our director, Sheldon Osmond, to bring up another graphic now. And this one shows the relative health of the Great Lakes. And again, for those listening on podcast, we're looking at the 5 Great Lakes right now. There are some that are colored blue, like Lake Superior, which means it's in relatively good shape. There are a couple that are in red, and as you might imagine, red means danger, danger, Will Robinson here. Lake Ontario and Lake Erie have got way too much red in them at the moment. Now, Jérôme, take us through this map and sort of explain to us, why is Lake Superior blue? Why are Ontario and Erie very red?
Well, the differences in colors is really a function of how many people are in the lakes, are around the lakes. We have most of the population around Lake Ontario, Lake Erie. Lake Erie has a lot of agriculture in the watershed, which provides the problem with phosphorus and, in turn, the blue-green algae. Lake Superior is the deepest of all the lakes. It has also the least people around it. So you do see these gradient of colors. All the lakes, if you look at them carefully, you do realize that the problems are mostly in the near shore zone, so around the shores. And this is where we have most of the impacts of pollutions from legacy sources, industrial activities, and agriculture. So this map needs to be updated as well. This is a couple of years old already. We are monitoring stressors. And what I want to add to this is scientists used to study one stressor at a time. And the science of today is to say that we need to realize that 1 + 1 is not equal to in terms of level of stresses. And it's all that discipline of cumulative stress. What does it mean if we have several stresses at the same time? And I think this is one of the key avenues where the science is going. And this is where we need everyone on board on all the Great Lakes to share their knowledge together so we have the understanding that we need to manage the lakes.
Just so I understand that, 1 + 1 does not equal 2 because as the stressors accumulate, the problems become exponentially difficult? They build on each other?
Yeah, you could have one stressor that has a certain level of severity, but if you add another substance, let's say 2 chemicals together, one chemical could have one effect, but if you have 2 chemicals together, then the effects on, let's say, the toxicity on a given species will be much larger.
Am I right that all 3 of you are on the advisory board of the International Joint Commission as it relates to the Great Lakes? Is that right?
Yep.
All 3
right.
of you are on it.
Yep.
Okay. So going forward, if we want to see maps, Mike, that are a lot less red and a lot more blue, what's that going to take?
Well, it's going to require, again, binational, transnational cooperation because the lakes are obviously not just U.S., Canada, but include First Nations, Métis, and tribal groups. But this cooperation across jurisdictional boundaries. It's going to require teams working together. It's going to require capacity on both sides of the border.
Capacity means people.
Capacity means people as well as infrastructure. And that's actually an area where Canada is starting to make ground and has a lot of room to grow. We had just last year, 2023 budget, an unprecedented appropriation of $420 million by the Canadian government. You spent over 10 years to help improve the health of the Great Lakes. Now, I've only been back in Canada for 6 years, but during that time, seen nothing like that. And so this is I'm optimistic for the future that Canada is moving in the right direction.
Okay, you've talked Canada. Now you know what I want to ask about next. 4 of the 5 Great Lakes we share. Michigan is entirely in the United States. Given what you see politically happening in the United States right now, can any of what you've talked about be accomplished without American leadership and intervention?
Some actions can be accomplished on one side of the border. We have these geographic places that are particularly degraded because of being industrial pasts. We can clean those up. We have federal funds, we have provincial funds, we have conservation authorities, we have educators.
We meaning just Canada?
Canada. We can do some local things. But when you're talking about the health of a whole lake, that is a transnational water body. The water circulates on both sides of the border. So you do what you want on that graphic that showed a red zone, some sort of nearshore zone on Superior. You clean that up, but it doesn't matter because the water keeps going round and round and round. So to restore to better health, to keep improving the quality of the Great Lakes, it cannot be done just on one side of the border. It does need the U.S. participation, it needs the U.S. scientists, it needs the U.S. interventions, it needs U.S. programs, policies, legislation. It won't happen just Canada doing it alone. As much as Canada may make best efforts, it is my opinion that it is a transnational water body that has 7 times the population density on the U.S. side, to Jérôme's point about populations. And so with that kind of population density, you can only do so much on the Canadian side. You need the U.S. scientists, federal scientists, state scientists, academics, industries, businesses. You need all hands on board. And a lot of those hands are disappearing.
Having said that, Jérôme, if America, which it clearly appears to be right now, is going through a phase where they are very distrustful of people who do what you do, of bureaucracy in general, of public service in general, can Canada move to fill that void?
I think Canada has to be ready to deal with a new set of relationships. Scientists are always open, I think, to collaborations. This is part of who we are. La raison d'être of science is always to share the knowledge. As Gail and Mike mentioned, it is impossible to take on all the work that is being done in the US. Canada doesn't have the infrastructure. Doing field work in the Great Lakes is not small business. You need big vessels, you need big probes, equipments. the same equipment that we use in oceanography in the oceans. And when we think about efficiency, that's why the Great Lakes Science is efficient. It's because we have been doing this together. It's not one side doing it together, doing it alone. If Canada was to do things alone, we would lose efficiency, actually, because we don't have the infrastructure. It would be too big of a task. And why should we have all the equipment on one side?
I'd like, Sheldon, would you mind, can you bring up that map again that we just saw with the 5 Great Lakes on it and with the some in red, some in blue? There we go. Thank you very much. Mike, I want you to take a look at that map and tell us what is the single most concerning geographic location in all of the Great Lakes. What spot would it be for you?
For me, it's easy. It's the Huron-Erie corridor, that region that stretches from Sarnia down to Amherstburg. That includes the 2 connecting channels, the St. Clair River, the Detroit River, and Lake St. Clair. That's where you have a convergence of high population density, industrialization, this legacy of industrial activity, and highly agricultural. Multiple stressors, and we're always dealing with another challenge, another risk.
Let me check out of curiosity whether the two of you look at that same map and see a different area of chief concern. What about it?
I defer to Mike on that observation. My chief concern is much more global. I see a proliferation of, for example, a particular contaminant that's everywhere. It may not show up as a red zone because of the way those maps are constructed, but we have microplastics everywhere and getting into our bodies, and they don't belong there. You may say, well, do we know that they're harming us? Should we actually be having plastics in our body? I don't think so. We have forever chemicals, as they're called, or polyfluorinated substances everywhere that don't disappear, that are in all of the lakes. So I think there are problems in each one of the lakes that, for me, I can't pick a pet location. I get Mike's point definitely, but I can't pick a pet location because I see certain problems that are pervasive everywhere.
And plastics are in the Great Lakes, all 5 of them?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Jérôme, which particular geographic location would you point to?
I think it all depends on what lens what stressor, what is at risk. If you ask me the questions about the Great Lakes and oil, for example, this is a topic we've been hearing about during these elections. There is a project to replace a line, the Strait of Mackinac line, a pipeline there. And the pipeline has been in the news because it's not in very good shape. There is a risk. We cannot afford to have a spill of oil in the Great Lakes. And so that, I think, is a hot spot.
Mike, I want to ask you, admittedly a speculative question, but I think speculation based on genuine concern and fear. We have seen the current American president withdraw from international agreements, some of which he himself has signed, right? He pulled the plug on whatever you want to call it, USMCA, CUSMA, the free trade agreement that he signed the first time he was president. What happens if he decides to withdraw from the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement?
Well, it would be a disaster. Again, though, I look to the representatives from the Great Lakes states, and I know there would be pushback. They realize how important this resource is to the livelihood of people living in those communities.
Are you hearing any rumors that that's in the works?
Oh, you hear rumors, but you hear rumors about a lot of things. So nothing concrete that I've heard.
Do you believe he'll do it?
Do I believe he'll do it? No. Do I believe he'll maybe talk about it? Maybe. But it's who knows? But I again, I've no concrete evidence that that's happening.
Gail, what would be the consequences of the American president unilaterally withdrawing from a Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement that has been in place for more than half a century?
It would be a political showdown.
Between whom and whom?
Between the governors, the premiers, and the president.
Yes.
And perhaps the prime minister. I'm not going to speculate on what happens if the agreement goes away, because I think the consequence of him saying he's going to tear it up or pull away would be exactly as we heard with the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. The people of the region would say, no way, this resource is too important. cooperation transnationally is what we've been doing for over 50 years. It works, and hands off. So I think it would be a political pushback. I don't even think it would go into legal channels. I think it would just be stopped. I can't imagine a future where there is no water quality agreement, because it would just, the devastation to the place would be enormous, and the political leaders wouldn't stand for that.
This is not a president who has demonstrated a great deal of concern about the environment. This is the drill baby drill president. Are you hearing rumors that he might pull the plug on the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement?
We've heard rumors. What I would argue is that the water quality agreement contributes to the three priorities that the Trump administration has put forward. The number one priority is about safer America. And the water quality agreement does that by making sure the water is safe to drink, to fish, to swim. Stronger America. The Great Lakes Water Quality Agreements make sure that we have a good environment which supports a healthy economy. We also make the Great Lakes more resilient to the stressors that we see today, including climate change. And the last one is about a more prosperous America. If you have a good environment, a healthy environment, you can support a healthy economy. So I think the point is to make is really to say that this is not going in disagreement with what the administration is putting forward, but we need to communicate this very carefully and in a very strong way so that this decision never happens.
And those points resonate everywhere, not just in America, but also in Canada. I mean, if we're trying to sell government investments on supporting the Great Lakes in Canada, make the same arguments. Safer, stronger, more prosperous.
Just a couple of minutes to go here, and I want to put one more issue on the table, and that is, we have also heard out of the Trump administration that they are most interested in commoditizing the water that is the Great Lakes. Do we have, Gail, to you first, do we have laws or some kind of protection in place to prevent that from happening unilaterally?
Well, one of the pieces of legislation that we have is, in the United States has a nice name, the Great Lakes Compact. Here it's called the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Sustainable Resources Act. But in any event, it's passed into law, and it was in 2008, I believe. And it was because the province of Ontario, back in that time and earlier, before 2008, gave approval to sell water from Lake Superior into tankers and send it overseas. And the governor said, whoa, wait a minute. You're not selling Great Lakes water. The Great Lakes, remember, is a swimming pool. It's a glacial relic. You know, 1% more water goes into the Great Lakes each year by rain or snow. But you turn on the taps and it never comes back. So the compact prohibits water from being sold or actually diverted away from the Great Lakes unless it's returned back. And it has some exceptions, but I don't want to get into too much detail about the exceptions, but you have to demonstrate that the only reason you're going to take water out of the Great Lakes is for humanitarian need, and that you could put that water back into the lakes, which means taking that water, selling it off, diverting it down to put out fires somewhere else is off the table by legislation. Now, what does legislation mean under the Trump administration? We don't know, but again, I think the governors and premiers signed this because they said, you're not taking the water out of the Great Lakes. And I think that compact of the Resources Act will have that same political clout to prevent water from being taken away.
Mike, last word to you, the last 30 seconds on this. Are you satisfied that this water cannot be commoditized willy-nilly by the administration?
As Gail mentioned, we have legislation in place already that addresses that. Will there be threats? I'm sure there will be. But again, it comes down to the interests of the people in place, the people living in these communities surrounding the Great Lakes basins, both U.S. and Canada, both sides of the aisle in the U.S., across party lines in Canada, all rallying around this important resource.
That's Mike McKay from University of Windsor. We also want to thank Gail Kranzberg from McMaster University and Jérôme Marty, University of Ottawa. It's great to have you three with us here at TVO tonight to remind us about the significance, the absolute singular significance of these 5 bodies of water. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Thank you.
Go Leafs.
That too. You've probably heard of lampreys, Asian carp, and zebra mussels as the invasive species threatening the health of the Great Lakes. But another rival is now competing with local fish for food, the quagga mussel. Quadrillions, yes, quadrillions of them are now blanketing the cold, deep beds of Lakes Huron and Michigan, and they are spreading. The damage caused by these tiny mussels and the work being done on both sides of the border to control them and increase threatened fish stocks is the subject of a TVO original documentary series, now also a film. It's called All Too Clear, and we are joined now by the filmmakers, Yvonne Drabert and Zach Melnick, the founders of the film production company Inspired Planet. And we're delighted to welcome you both to TVO.
Thank you for having us.
This is outstanding. No, this is great. Okay, Yvonne, start us off. Quagga mussels first identified in the Great Lakes like in the 1990s. They're not new. So what reason did you think all these years later they would be ripe for a documentary treatment?
Well, we actually live on the Saugeen or Bruce Peninsula on Lake Huron, and we noticed that it was really tough to buy whitefish from our local fisher. And we started digging into that story, and all signs kind of pointed back to the quagga mussel. And folks have probably heard of the zebra mussel.
Yep.
It's a cousin of the zebra mussel, but they're kind of interesting. They like to live a little deeper, and they don't need anything to attach to. So that means the quagga mussel can live on any part of the Great Lakes, all the way to the deepest depths.
Are they worse than the zebra mussel, Zach?
Oh yeah, there's thousands of times more quagga mussels than there ever were zebra mussels in the Great Lakes. And really on an ecosystem level, they're much more damaging. They're basically, if you think of the food web as, a pyramid, as we often learned about it back in science class, the bottom of that, right, is algae and zooplankton and all the little critters that the fish like to eat. Well, the mussels, they're consuming the algae that's the bottom of that food web. So it leaves a lot less food available to the fish that you and I and many others like to eat.
And the whitefish in Lake Huron is the best, right? It really is fantastic. Sorry, whitefish, we like to eat you, but you're great. But the implications for this long term are what?
Yeah, so we've seen a real drop in the whitefish populations around not only Lake Huron, Lake Michigan, Lake Ontario. They're actually the most important commercial fish species. So they're important for all those families that have fished for generations, also indigenous communities around the lakes. And it's not only the whitefish that are being affected. We love those whitefish, but we use the whitefish in the film as a focal point, but really it's having whole ecosystem impacts. It's changing the lakes probably more than anything since the glaciers.
Now you say lakes. You live on Lake Huron, right? Okay, but this has the potential to go beyond Lake Huron? Yeah?
So right now, if you went anywhere on any Great Lake south of Lake Superior and you went out in a boat to about 100 feet or so of water and you put down a robot like we like to do, there's a very good chance that what you're actually going to find is a bed of these invasive quagga mussels. This has sort of quietly and slowly been happening over the last couple of decades, but because us humans live on land, not deep down underwater, people almost had no idea that this was happening.
Sheldon, can I get a wide shot here of us in the studio for a second? Okay. See that screen there? Is that them? That's what they look like.
Yeah, so this is quagga mussels. And as Zach said, if we went out anywhere in a boat right now and looked down, we'd see a field of these.
How big are they?
They're about the size of your thumb, so they're not huge. But when you have, each one of them can filter 1 to 7 liters of water a day. And so if you have a quadrillion of them in a lake, that means that, for instance, all of Lake Huron is filtered in about a week. So that's changing how our water even moves in those lakes, but it's really changing that whole system of life in the lakes. And people can't see that far down mostly, but what people have noticed is that, hey, Lake Huron is really clear now. And we think, oh, isn't that amazing?
No, it's not.
But that's the mussels. The lakes are about 3 times clearer now than they were before the mussels. So they really are changing everything about our lakes.
It's clear, which makes you think it's beautiful, but it's clear because it's eating all the life in there.
Yeah, basically there's nothing living in there.
So that's not a good thing. How'd they get in there in the first place?
Well, from the ballast water of cargo ships. There are a lot of good regulations in now that stop this from happening, but back in the 80s, that's how a lot of invasive species got here, 80s and 90s, and so that's how these guys got here, along with the zebra mussel. And the zebra mussel did much better first around the shorelines, but these guys love to live way out in the middle of the lakes and just sort of cover that lake bottom, those places where humans just don't go.
We have got some what do you call it in the biz? Viz? We've got some viz we want to show here. Sheldon, number 7. Let's get, this is some of the gear that you used to make the documentary. This is, I guess, underwater remote operated drones? Is that what we're looking at here? Okay.
Yeah.
Yvonne, tell us what's neat about this?
Yeah, so you've probably heard about aerial drones,
Sure.
and we've used a lot of that tech. We've now put it in robots that can go underwater. But robots, we can't send signals through the water the same way we can through the air, so it's always tethered. So we have a fiber optic tether. So that allows us to see in real time 4K from the surface, and we drive it around like a video game. The other cool thing about this is that it's got a battery that lasts up to 12 hours. So that means we can go down and we can spend time with animals underwater, and that lets us see behaviors that people just haven't seen before, and that's how we got all this cool footage for All Too Clear.
You don't have to go down there with it, though, do you?
We don't. We drive it from the surface, and I mean, this has truly enabled, like, we're just independent artist, filmmaker types, right? But we get to kind of play James Cameron in this case. So we can use this technology and go right down to the very deepest part of Lake Superior if we wanted, and get this spectacular footage, which would be totally impossible before. And so it's really allowed us to tell this story at all in the first place. So like, we took this camera down there, which gets incredible images in very low light. We could see these endless fields of mussels, and even the science people didn't know that's what that looked like. It was just really, I think, illuminating for a lot of people to just see that imagery.
Well, I was actually going to ask you about that. Did scientists know how significant the penetration was of these things into our lakes?
They did. There have been science folks in both Canada and the U.S. who have been tracking this change. But, you know, it was really hard for them to get the word out about it, right? Again, this is an invisible problem happening, you know, deep in the water. So that's where we think our role really is to come in and show people, right? So because we can make those awesome images and sort of bring it to life for people, it's a whole different thing than scientists writing reports about stuff.
And I think, you know, when a lot of people think about underwater, they think about sharks and whales and coral reefs, and those things are awesome and important.
But not in Lake Huron.
We all live right here on the Great Lakes. There's 35 million of us right here. So it was really our goal to shine a spotlight on that freshwater world that we live right next to.
All right, now that you've shined that spotlight and we know what's down there, does anybody plan to do anything about it?
Well, there are some really amazing folks out there who are trying really hard. All of the things that are being tried right now are in the experimental stages. We've got some pesticides. Mussels are really sensitive to copper, so we've got a copper-based pesticides that's being tried out. We have some folks doing some genetic engineering. We also have some folks that are just trying to plow them out of the way and see what happens. There's just so many mussels out there. It's basically a monoculture. So if you get rid of them, what happens then? There's a lot of really great efforts, but we're really just beginning our efforts to try to turn this thing around. What I can say is that there's folks also who are working on trying to help our native species make it through this tough time, so that when we've figured something out with the mussels, we'll still have those native fish for the generations to come.
You may have noticed, Zach, Canada and U.S. are not getting along all that well these days. But I wonder if they're getting along well and working together well in hopes of solving this issue.
Well, historically, that's how it's been, right? This is a true partnership. A lot of work and money for the mussel issue, and then science around it has come from the U.S. They have a really big pot of money called the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, and that's what a lot of the projects that we look at in All Too Clear, they were supported by this money, and it's really unclear what's going to happen with that now in the future. But I guess we just hope that our friends in the U.S. and in Canada here can keep working on that really great relationship they have to work on issues like the mussel here to keep the lakes healthy for the future.
Now, I gather in the course of making this documentary, while you were looking for these mussels, you happened upon something else. And we've got some viz of that as well. Sheldon, number 10. Let's roll this. You found the wreck of a steamship. Is this called the Africa? And it sank, what, 200 years ago?
Yeah, this is indeed the Africa. It sank in 1895 with, unfortunately, all 11 crew members aboard. And we ended up finding the ship. We work with a lot of fishy folks. And There were some people doing a fish survey offshore with a very fancy sonar who found a bump and said, hey, you guys should check this out. So we went out with our robot, we put it down, and man, what a surprise.
So you did not know that it was there?
No,
No,
we did
no
not.
one knew it was there.
Yeah.
Complete surprise.
Yeah.
Total surprise. And look at it. It's totally covered in these quagga mussels.
Oh, yes.
Right? There's millions of them on this thing. And they're slowly, degrading the quality of that wreck too. They sort of eat into it. They have acid in their waste that messes it up as well. So it's a problem for cultural heritage because all of the deep water shipwrecks out there south of Lake Superior really look like that today. So archaeologists, when they go down, they don't see like the fine detail on a ship. They just see like these masses of mussels. So it's really impacting both the ecosystem, but as well the cultural heritage of the Great Lakes.
Did explorers, who do this for a living and look around for this kind of stuff, did they know it was there but had just never seen it?
No, it was a total surprise to, in the 1800s, steamships were the transport trucks of their day. And of course, people were always pushing the limits into winter to try to get that last run in. And there were many ships like the Africa that were lost in winter storms. And, there's still hundreds, if not thousands of ships out there in the Great Lakes that we still haven't yet found.
On the bottom.
On the
just
bottom.
waiting to be discovered.
Yeah, the Great Lakes are these vast places, and that sometimes we forget that living right here, but they're basically inland seas that are special, anywhere in the world. It's pretty amazing.
But at some point, the quagga mussels are going to be so intense that they will destroy all of these old ships. Is that right?
There's millions of them on there. There's so much weight. Eventually, delicate things will fall off. But things like World War II planes that have fallen in the lakes, they've actually, their acidic waste has degraded them. They are falling apart faster than even the ships. So the problem is happening right now.
Now, I know you didn't set out to make a documentary about the fate of the Africa, but having discovered it, did you look into the background of it and find out what it was all of? Yeah? What was it doing there?
It was hauling coal from Ohio to Owen Sound.
Oh, okay.
And it was actually towing a barge, and they were both hauling coal. And what happened was that the weather just got terrible in October, and the Africa went down. The barge made it to shore. And that's why we know the story of what happened to the Africa, because the captain of the barge lived. And interestingly, after we found the ship and figured out that it was the Africa, we put the word out there, and descendants of people who had family members who went down on this ship reached out to us, and that was super cool. And then we actually got to take the descendants of the captain out on our boat using the robot, took them down to look at the ship and see that resting place of their ancestors, and that was pretty cool to have that opportunity to share that moment with them.
So, Mr. Cameron, you have found your own Titanic.
Lake Huron version, yeah.
Lake Huron version of the Titanic. That's quite amazing, actually. Okay, back to these mussels now. We know that there are all sorts of scientific endeavors that have been undertaken for many decades to look into the zebra mussels, Asian carp, and that kind of thing. How fixated right now is official science on trying to get to the bottom of this and do something about it?
There do seem to be a number of projects and a number of working groups, cross-border working groups where people are trying to figure out what we can do. And it does seem like this insurmountable problem. But folks might remember in the 60s, we had this thing called the sea lamprey come in.
Oh, yeah.
And, we thought, our fish are goners. Our fisheries are done. But we figured it out. We put a lot of money, we put a lot of effort into trying to manage the lamprey. And I think that if we're able to put that same momentum behind trying to manage these mussels, there's definitely hope for us and for our fish in the future.
You touched on this earlier, but I think it's worth going at this one more time. DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency in the United States, is taking a meat cleaver, not particularly skillfully, I think we can say, to all sorts of government spending right now. Maybe some of it is a good idea. Clearly, there have been things caught in the crossfire right now that perhaps ought not to be cut. How concerned are you that you're about to see an end to all of this research and scientific effort in this area?
Well, I'll say that every single one of the groups that we worked with on All Too Clear in the U.S. is now facing serious cuts. So we don't know what's going to happen. I know that all of the research that was happening up till right now is essentially frozen. So no one knows really what's going to happen, but hopefully our friends in the U.S. will just realize what a wonderful shared resource that we have here, and that it's really a benefit for us to work together to try to keep it healthy.
We don't want to be alarmist here, but obviously you two made this documentary because this is an issue you care about and you are concerned about. So if for whatever reason the budgets for these things are cut and this work stops, what are the implications?
Well, nature is resilient, right? And so whether or not us humans are here and nature is doing things that us humans want, over time, nature has a great power to heal itself. And so we have great faith in that. In fact, we see that happening a little bit already. So there are unexpected changes that these mussels have caused that have caused some species to actually do better. We talked about the whitefish, who's not doing very well, but species like the lake trout might actually be benefiting a little bit from them. So it's a complicated world. It's not something we need to, I think, necessarily despair about, but it's a huge change. And I think it's just useful for people to know about it. But the other part of our mission is just to show people how cool it is down there.
We've got some viz of that. Can we show this? Show number 14 here. This is, let's take a look at this footage here. This is really quite something. Now again, for people listening on podcast who can't see this, take us through what we're seeing here.
So this is the first known recording of lake whitefish spawning. And you have a male kind of getting up beside the female. And this has never been seen before. And they go vertical and they start to vibrate together in this dance. And you can see that the female releases some eggs and the male releases some sperm. And those eggs go down into they call it a freshwater reef. And those eggs stay down there until the spring when they're born into little whitefish babies.
You got that footage?
We did, yeah.
That has never been seen before?
So far as we and our science friends know.
And of course, whitefish like to do their thing in the end of November, early December, and we got this footage while it was snowing and we were both sick. So one of the reasons people haven't seen it before is because usually the weather is really quite horrible when it's happening. So
and the drone technology really allows us to swim with the fishes in a way that just simply wasn't possible before.
You want to do that as opposed to sleep with the fishes, which we remember.
That's a different movie.
That was The Godfather, if I remember. It's a different movie. How much is it to get one of those devices down there? Like that underwater drone looks like a very sophisticated piece of equipment. How much is that?
It's on the pricey side for sure. Yeah. But it is within the reach of, independent entrepreneurial filmmaker types, right? So where before you needed to be James Cameron to have the same kind of image quality and technology, which is millions of dollars, but this is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Hundreds of thousands. Well, you can't just reach into your back pocket for that. So where'd you guys get the money to make this movie?
TVO.
TVO pitched some, right?
Yeah, a bit, but it was actually a lot. There was a couple environmental charities here in Canada. Georgian Bay Forever was one of them, and then in the U.S., the Nature Conservancy.
Oh yeah.
And we also got some support from the science community as well, who wanted to help us film these wildlife events and show people how these creatures were behaving. Because if we know how they spawn, for instance, maybe there are clues that we can find to help them recover and stay really alive and thriving for the communities that rely on them in this new age of the quagga mussel.
Every documentary filmmaker I've interviewed say they make documentaries not because they want to, but because they have to. There's something that just burns inside them to tell a story because they want to see some particular positive impact happen as a result of their work. So, Yvonne, what would be the positive impact you'd like to see happen as a result of this effort of yours?
Well, I think we've had a really great working relationship with the scientific community and the indigenous communities around the lakes this whole time. Every time, anyone who's ever gone fishing knows that the hardest thing is finding the fish. So we would work with these folks to find the fish, and as soon as we got footage of the fish, we would share it with them. And that's been this great reciprocal relationship we've had going on. And as a result of that, we've got, scientific papers being published from the work we're doing. And as filmmakers, we love having this great film, but now we're part of advancing the science on keeping the Great Lakes healthy and keeping our fish populations alive. And so for us, that's been a really amazing feeling and probably the best thing we could hope for coming out of this show.
You use the word relationship. And for those who don't know, how well do you two know each other?
Pretty well.
So Zach and I are a husband and wife filmmaking team, and we've been making films together for about 20 years, and we're still married. So there we go.
Now, that's the achievement, right?
Yeah.
That's amazing. How long have you known each other?
We were high school sweethearts, actually. So
Okay, that's adorable.
over 20 years.
That's absolutely adorable. Okay, and what number movie is this for you two? Which number documentary?
We've made about 40 hours of documentary film and television,
Wow,
so a number of
okay.
series as well. So
Okay.
we're getting up there at this point.
And
yeah.
you're still speaking?
We do different things. I mean, Yvonne is extremely good at many things that I'm not as good at, and I think that's the best way to keep
That's the
that
trick, yeah.
partnership going in all ways for a long time.
Gotcha. You got a next project up your sleeves yet?
Well, yeah. I mean, because of the success that we've had in just showing people the wonders, really, of the Great Lakes, we want to use this technology to keep telling these underwater stories, to bring that magic of the freshwater world to life for people. So we hope to hear, hope you'll be able to hear more about that in the near future.
Excellent. The name of this documentary is All Too Clear. We are happy to have partnered with you on it and helped make it happen. And Inspired Planet Productions. Keep going, kids. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Thanks, Steve.
Yvonne Drabert and Zach Melnick. Thanks so much. You can catch All Too Clear right after this program, and it's also on our website at TVO.org. And that is the agenda for Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025. Tomorrow on the program, is Russia weaker than we think? We'll explore that. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at TVO.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.